Hey friends, welcome back to Hardscape's Urban Homestead, where we're growing gardens and community to be rooted, spacious, and connected. My name's Michaela, and I'm glad to have you here. And welcome to the kitchen. Of course, when we grow gardens and spend time in the garden growing food, eventually we got to spend time in the kitchen. So today is a kitchen day, a processing day, and I thought I would just take you along with me. Firstly, to share the kitchen project I'm working on, which is a brewing project that I'm excited about. And then secondly, to circle back to something I promised you in a previous video, and it's time to talk about it. So the project, first off, involves these gorgeous pears and these lovely passion fruits from the garden and this brew bucket. I've gotten really interested lately in learning, well, not learning, I've known how to do it for a while, but maybe refining, making country fruit wines. I live in a region that grows a lot of fruit and very often find myself with an abundance of fruit that it's like there's only so much jam you can make, right? So got really interested in brewing. I've got several batches of different fruit wines going on over here, and today I'm making a pear and passion fruit wine. I've tried out a couple of different methods, a couple of different recipe structures from different teachers. Didn't love the first couple that I tried, didn't have great results. And so I'm trying a third that I'm feeling much better about, and it's in this book, Wild Winemaking by Richard Bender. If you are interested in more detailed instructions about this, or just, let you know more about this process, I am a beginner, not an expert. So the disclaimer is I'm not here to teach you how to do it. That would be for the experts, but I'm here to just tell you about what I'm up to and hopefully inspire you to do some of the same. But the reason that I have this absolute glut of pears, I actually have 2 cases of pears right now, way more that I can use in this recipe, is because of my connections with a local farm who is happy to share their overflow when they have produce that they can't sell before it's going to go bad, and are happy to have it go to use rather than just to the compost pile. And for me, this is a really powerful example of the value of community sufficiency. Community sufficiency is one of the values and mindsets that I've identified in my life, that operate in my life, that I associate with the identity of a homesteader. In the introduction video to this channel, which I'll link below if you haven't had a chance to take a look at it, I talk about how I define homesteading. And that homesteading for me, similar to some of my mentors, is more about a set of mindsets and a value system that we operate in our life than it is about having a very specific type of property. So traditionally, we would think of a homestead as a multi-acre property where one or more families live and meet as many of their needs as they can on that land. And that is something that many people are doing now. In fact, there's a renaissance of people returning to that sort of lifestyle. But for most of us, it's just not realistic or achievable. It's not something I aspire to manage a huge property. But for about 22 years, I have lived a lifestyle that I would call urban homesteading. And for me, that's about, again, applying a series of mindsets and values in my daily life and letting those values and mindsets shape my behavior and my thinking and my activities. And this far down the line, they shape them quite a lot. And so in that opening video, I just kind of gave you a list, an introduction to my working list of values. It's by no means exhaustive. It's not everything, but really the ones that are at the most heart for me. And I promised that I would dig into those in more detail in future videos. And this is such a video. So because I have this beautiful abundance of pears that came to me through community connections, I thought this would be a great time to talk about the value and the mindset of community sufficiency. And I'm going to do that while I chop up these pears. I've got 5 pounds of pears here, and I don't know how many passion fruits, a bunch. And I'm going to just mix them in this brew bucket and get them going today. So it's nice to be able to have a conversation with all of you while I'm doing a mundane task. So, community sufficiency. Many folks in the homesteading communities, if you kind of dig into, the homesteading communities generally, you're going to see a lot of discussion and perspectives around self-sufficiency. And that makes a lot of sense, right? Because the idea of having a homestead is that you're able to grow a lot of your food, perhaps build a lot of your infrastructure, just meet as many of your needs as you can on your own, be self-sufficient. And, during time periods such as the one we're in now, where there is a lot of concern about food shortages, about supply chain interruption, the pricing of things is going through the roof, which is part of why I started this wine project, because wine prices have been going through the roof. It's one of those kind of luxury items that, it's not a have to have. It's not something we need for our survival, but it's nice to have. And so if I can if I can figure out how to make a decent batch of wine, remains to be seen. Then, that from ingredients that barely cost me anything, well, that is a win as far as sufficiency goes. And so we're in a time period where we're seeing a lot of restrictions on supplies, we're seeing prices raise crazy, and it's certainly understandable that many folks would be looking at the idea of self-sufficiency. The challenge for me with that languaging, and sometimes language is limited. It's incredibly, of course, important and valuable, but it is limited in what it can express. And I think it really matters the words that we use, because the words that we use, implant pretty firm ideas into our mind. And so when I think about self-sufficiency, and when I look at the way in which it's discussed in a lot of different, online forums and communities and at conferences and, homesteading events, what I hear is a narrative of lack and of fear, a narrative of not enough, and a narrative of let me get mine and hold on to it. It's a mindset that can, without much provocation, can really tip into, really some ugly levels of unkindness to people, honestly, when we're really, facing the idea that there isn't enough, that I'm going to work hard to become self-sufficient, and I'm going to hold on to what I have and keep it from other people. Now, that's not how everybody is thinking about it, of course. And I think a lot of people do actually use the term self-sufficiency in a way that is more related to community. But this is maybe just an overly long explanation of why I'm using the term community sufficiency. Because for me, when we think about community sufficiency, we're looking beyond our immediate ability to meet our needs. We're looking, of course, towards cooperation and away from isolation. And we're really, in a lot of ways, cultivating a mindset of abundance rather than lack. Because when we look out into our community, there are many, many, many resources to be found. And there are many resources that we don't need every single person in a community to have access to, as long as somebody has access to it and is willing to share and is able to receive some form of reciprocation from their community for that sharing. And so that's, where I'm coming from when I talk about community sufficiency. And this was something that became so essential to me in 2020 during that, year to 2 years where we were really isolated and locked down and closed down. My business shut down completely, as did many people's. And I was really concerned about, having enough money. And I was really concerned about, being able to have enough food and have, get things repaired when I needed them, and, just all the things that we need. And what I found in short order was that leaning into collaboration, connection, generosity, reciprocity with my neighbors is what, really erased that fear from my mind. Because what I found is that when we look into our neighborhoods, into our communities, there is abundant resources. And I began quite a bit of barter. with people. You know, I have my garden, I have my chickens, I have skills, I have, you know, I'm pretty good in the kitchen, do a lot of herbal medicine stuff. So I actually had a lot to offer back into my community. Not just to trade, but also to share equipment, right? Not everybody needs to have an Instapot. If your neighbor has an Instapot and is willing to share it, which is the case, I wanted an Instapot and couldn't afford it at the time. And my neighbor's like, I don't use this thing that often, so let's just share it. And not only did that meet some very real needs at the time, I was amazed at how much just, you know, day-to-day food was able to be supplied, you know, through my community. I found, you know, there was that sourdough bread craze that went around, everybody making sourdough bread. I tried it. I was terrible at it. Didn't like it. Don't want to do it. Took a lot more consistency than I tend to bring to things, but there are many people who love it and are super good at it. And I found a neighbor who makes just excellent sourdough bread who always needs eggs. And so ever since then, we've had a very robust trading eggs for bread, you know, deal that we do every couple of weeks. So not only, you know, was I able to meet a lot of needs without using money during that time, but I also, not surprisingly, but I guess it took me by surprise, built connections with my neighbors that I didn't have before, and that have continued to bear fruit since then. Just not only deep friendships, but, you know, pet sitting opportunities for my kid, because we've built good relationships with people, opportunities to contribute to my neighborhood in creative ways, be getting involved with the rebuild of our local park, just endless forms of joy and connection, and you know, the things that just really make a life feel full and robust that honestly I just didn't have before. I'm introverted. I tend towards keeping to myself. I have this amazing co-housing community just right around the corner from me that, you know, does a lot of community stuff. I had lived here 10 years, hadn't really connected with them, and now they're some of my best friends. And so, you know, I'm saying all of this, for many of you, this is going to be like super obvious, right? Like, of course you trade with your neighbors. Of course you collaborate, do things together to better your community. But this was just not something that was a lifestyle for me, to a very robust degree. I mean, I'm not a hermit, right? I certainly, you know, do a lot in my community, but it was around a more narrow range of things. And I think for a lot of it, like, I just wasn't sure how much people would value, you know, the gardening and the cooking and all of these things. And it turns out people value it quite a bit. So that really changed my heart and my mind around putting in the effort that it takes to be in community. So I wanted to just share a couple of other examples of what that can look like, both in my life and in you know, people that I'm connected to. So certainly the food trading, which is robust and ongoing, and happens quite often these days. And then, as I mentioned, you know, these pears came to me from a local farm who had an excess. They couldn't sell them all before they started to go bad. And because I had a relationship with them, they made the offer to let me take them. Now, then you run into the, you know, the challenge of abundance, the burden of abundance sometimes. I now have 2 cases of pears that are rapidly becoming soft and need to be dealt with. This batch of wine will not even barely dent them. So we'll see. At the very least, though, they'll get to go to my chickens and they'll become eggs. So that is an ongoing source of abundance. And then because there's, of course, more of this particular resource that often comes to me than I can personally use, it becomes something that I can again share out to my community, either through trade or gifting or, you know, making something to bring to a local event. It becomes a new source of generosity and sharing. Okay, so I'm done cutting up the pears. Gonna move on to the passion fruits and realized I needed to grab a bowl. The passion fruit I'm growing out in my backyard. I've had these vines going for a few years now, and last year was the first year that they really created a decent harvest. So I started experimenting with it. And I had never seen a passion fruit up close until I started growing them. They're very weird. They have this kind of greenish yellow slime inside. These are all eggs. I mean, in a sense, they're seeds inside their little black seeds. So they're kind of odd looking fruits. I don't love just eating the pulp. My neighbor loves just sucking the pulp right out of there. I don't love that texturally, but the flavor is wonderful. And so I've been using it to flavor other things. And so I thought it would make a nice just flavor enhancement to this pear wine. So I'm just scooping out the pulp into a bowl, and then that'll go into the brew bucket with the pears. So let's see. I mentioned earlier equipment sharing. So, we don't all need a chainsaw. But it's nice if somebody in the neighborhood has a chainsaw or a rototiller or whatever the case may be, and is willing to share it to let people use it in exchange for getting to use something that they need. And I love this. And this one is actually a little bit harder than just straight trading something that we have created for something else, because it does require more cooperation, right? It requires, coming to an agreement about how and when the supplies will be used, how it'll get shared, what the responsibility for, caring for the equipment is, and so on. But these are things that, can be easily navigated if we have good relationships already. This really kind of struck me when I was in Pennsylvania visiting my dad recently. The landscape there is so very different than here, not only the natural landscape, but also in the way that the neighborhoods are designed. Much larger lots, these huge, beautiful, wide open, grassy lawns in the front and the back. Barely anybody has any fences up, so the yards just kind of flow into each other, making these large expanses of grass. Which I always have to remind my Central California heart, like, nobody's actually watering these lawns. Like, this isn't a drought problem. There's enough rain there to support these lawns. It's always a shock for my system because I come from a very drought-riddled area. But anyway, these huge lawns, which I always fantasize about putting a giant garden on every single one of them. But hey, it's not my garden, not my yard. And absolutely everybody has a riding mower, right? A gas-powered riding mower. And so at least twice a day, like every day that we were there, somebody would be on their riding mower mowing their lawn. And, riding mower is a substantial piece of equipment. Expensive to buy, to maintain. You got to buy gas for it. And, it struck me like not everybody needs a riding mower if people would share. Can't be that hard to create a schedule for when something will be used, and, agreements about how it will be maintained. Anyway, that just struck me as interesting. And so, I've made it part of my lifestyle over the last few years, especially, to look for those places where I have equipment in the kitchen, in the garden, in the household in general, that others might be able to use and not have to buy themselves, and looking for similar things that I need that I can ask for. It's one of those things that, like, part of it is creating a culture of asking. Like, I realized that I kind of had a subconscious belief that it wasn't okay to ask, right? That, like, that's infringing on people's, privacy and the greedy somehow. Like, I really have this kind of subconscious belief that I think, again, comes from this mentality of scarcity, of, get what you can and hold on to it. Don't let other people have it. That is, I think, more prevalent in the psyche of our culture than perhaps we want to, admit. And so it took some doing to just convince myself to even ask. And of course, once I did, people are very happy to help out. One more example, of course we could go on, and I really welcome you to share your own examples of community sufficiency down in the comments, both for, my own learning and inspiration and that of others. But just one more I wanted to share. So my best friend is a farmer, which is a tremendous blessing in my life. She has an urban farm on 2 different sites, one of which is about a mile from my house, the other of which is in the next town over. They have a small market farm, primarily selling at a farm stand and then also to local school districts. And then they also own a organization called Spork Food Hub, which is a consolidator that purchases produce from the small family farms in the region that are too small to sell to large customers like school districts, like prisons, like hospitals that need to buy in bulk. And so the Food Hub consolidates all of that and is able to market to and broker with larger consumers, which is a fantastic resource for our local farmers. I'm hoping to do an interview with my friend who runs these endeavors pretty soon and just share more of what they're up to. But their farm that's in the next town over is backs up against a school, a high school. It's truly an urban farm. It's like right in the center of a very dense urban area. You can't even really see it from the street. You just see a busy street. So they back up against a high school, a post office, and then a motorcycle shop that is fronts the main street. And the guys at the motorcycle shop have kind of a side hustle with firewood and other types of, processing of logs. And so whenever I go to the farm, there's always a huge pile of logs, big, tree trunk logs, huge pile in the back of the shop. And, often there's somebody out there, cutting up logs. It's apparently something that they do for kind of recreation and, stress management, which is fantastic. And then they bust it down into firewood and they sell it as a side hustle. And I asked my friend the other day, where do they get all of these logs? Like there's just a never ending supply of logs. The pile, if anything, just grows bigger and bigger. And, she said a colleague of theirs owns a tree trimming business and a tree removal business and just, brings them logs all the time. And, on the one hand, this is like, sure, it's great to have a friend, in an industry that can share things that you need. But digging into a little bit deeper, the tree removal business, if they don't bring these logs to the motorcycle shop, they have to chip up the wood. So they have to maintain a pretty substantial chipper. And, obviously there's a lot of wear and tear on a piece of machinery like that when you're chipping up giant trees all the time. And then once that, those chips are broken down, they have to be taken somewhere. So they could, partner with an organization like Chip Drop that where people like me can sign up to get a load of chips, but that's no guarantee that you'll be able to offload, all of what you need. And then you have to go and find the people who want them. And so by delivering the logs in their whole form, unchipped, to the motorcycle shop, that saves them wear and tear on their equipment. It saves them time. And it saves them the kind of logistics of having to partner with Chip Drop or, some other method of connecting with people who would take these excess. And if all of that fails, then they have to pay to take it to the dump. And then it just goes to the dump. Makes more garbage. So it's a really beautiful form of reciprocation where a lot of different needs get met. And where a product that really could be considered a waste product, from the perspective of the tree trimming company, these logs or the chips is a waste product. It's not valuable to them once they've done their job, and just becomes garbage or becomes a problem for them to deal with. And this is a business solution for them that not only is easier and cheaper for them, but turns that waste product into a resource. It turns it into something that another business can make a little bit of income on and can provide a product that people need. So I just loved that as an example of community sufficiency, of resourcefulness, of creativity, and of really making the most of the resources we have. One of the other values, that we'll talk about in another video is around resourcefulness and efficiency and, really making the most of our resources, kind of pushing back against this culture of waste, of seeing everything as disposable and of garbage, as opposed to seeing everything as a potential input, a potential resource, making something that might be a problem into something that's actually a solution to something else. We'll talk about that in another video, but again, just a really beautiful example of both of those things. So community sufficiency, it's a good thing. It's an important value to have as a homesteader. It creates community, collaboration, cooperation. It generates a sense of abundance, a feeling that there is enough, right? That there isn't lack, there isn't scarcity, because somebody in our community has something that can meet our need, most likely, if we're willing to reach out and be generous and ask. But I would be remiss if I didn't touch on one other value in our list of homesteading values that really dovetails and is a really important aspect of community sufficiency. And that is responsibility in our relationships. Now, oftentimes when we think about that, it's kind of, we're thinking about the family relationships, how we relate as a family. And I'll maybe on another video talk about that from the perspective of family, of kind of what this lifestyle has meant for my kids and my immediate family, my immediate neighbors. But in this context, I want to talk about the fact that, and this is coming from someone who, again, is an introverted hermit who, when I'm not in the best space, I can tend towards isolation. And part of that is because working and collaborating in community is hard. It's hard. It can be hard. The more you do it, the longer you do it, the greater the likelihood that some form of conflict or disagreement or conflicting needs, misunderstandings, will arise and will, cause a sticking point in the process of community sufficiency. And that the difficulty of that, and the fact that our culture does not set us up well to be emotionally intelligent and to be, patient and to really cultivate skills for good, robust, long-term community collaboration. Certainly some aspects of culture do. My kids' elementary school was particularly good at focusing on those types of topics, which I very much appreciated. But that wasn't my experience in school. I definitely didn't learn anything about, what it means to be a good collaborator and to be in good community with people until much later in life. And so, it's enough to really make us avoid the idea of community sufficiency, because it can be really hard. Because, many of us, myself included, can be, conflict avoidant and not really feel comfortable like stepping into the realm of navigating disagreements or even just differences of needs, right? Like even scheduling conflicts can be stressful when we're talking about collaborating. The other piece of that is that, like we're social animals, right? We evolved to be in community, to collaborate. It's part of how we survived as long as we did, being very vulnerable animals. But the reality is that most of the hurts that we've experienced, many of the, harm that we can experience or inflict happens in community. Most of the difficult, harmful things that we experience, at least interpersonally, right, between people, happen with the people that we're closest to, right? Whether our family or our neighbors or our local government, right? And so many of us carry wounds from community. It's really something that I think is important for us to talk about openly and to look at. It's definitely something that plays into my work, doing community work and doing healing work with people. this idea that, the wounds that we carry most often happened in community. And so when we talk about community sufficiency and collaboration and connection and the beauty, the joy, the abundance that can bring into our life, it's really important that we be honest about the other side of that and address that, because it can be a real barrier to people wanting to be in connection with each other. It can be something that really prevents us from being in good, robust relationship with each other. So if that is the case for you, and if, when I started talking about community collaboration, if you started rolling your eyes and saying, no way, that doesn't work, or no way I would try that again. I hear you. That's real. And my wish is that you follow that thread and perhaps challenge yourself to ask some new questions about that. Does it have to be that way? And maybe, seek out some support to look at those wounded places, to help to heal those places, to, whether that's within your own community or outside of it. Because while it's understandable that we might push away from community for that reason, it hobbles us. It takes away something that not only is valuable for us, particularly in times of scarcity, but it's our birthright. It's our birthright to be in robust, healthy community. We need it. Belonging is a human need that is really central to our identity. And so just wanted to name that. It felt really important in the context of this conversation. And I hope that there's something in this for you. I'd love to, again, hear your own examples of community sufficiency, perhaps your own examples of being in good, responsible relationship with others in terms of community, and what questions you have that come up when you think about this topic. Also, if you are interested in learning more about this fruit wine shenanigans, I'd be happy to make another video kind of going more in depth on this process. But for now, I'm going to take this lovely bowl of passion fruit pulp, which I don't know if you can see it. It's really odd looking. Looks kind of like scrambled eggs with I don't know what that's in there, seeds or something, I guess. Pour that in here with our pears. Next step is to get some sugar water going. We'll go from there. So thanks for spending some time with me while I do this project. It's nice to have a little bit of company while doing something that is repetitive and a little bit boring. So I appreciate you spending some time with me talking about sufficiency, talking about provisions. And as you go through your day, may you be deeply provisioned both in your own self and in your community. Thanks so much for watching. Till next time, I love you. Goodbye.